Hello, my name is Amlanjyoti Goswami. I head legal and regulation at IIHS, the Indian Institute for Human Settlements. I'm here to speak with you in an interactive way on why essentially law and public policy students, why should they be interested in applying for the IIHS's Urban Fellowship Program. In terms of format, I'll keep it light by doing a brief introduction of myself and to the program and what I do in it. And I would like to spend more time in responding to your questions. I think that should be kind of the way to do things. Quick intro in terms of background. I have degrees in sociology from Delhi University and subsequently in law from Delhi University and from Harvard Law School, where I went on a scholarship. I have experience in public policy, regulation, litigation, corporate transactional experience, and I'm one of a core group of people who part of the founding kind of management team of IIHS. So that's quickly by way of education qualification. What I do at IIHS is a multiple kind of things. On the one hand, I have a very strategic institutional role in growing and developing the organization. Also as the head of the legal and regulation function. I also have a project research role where I've been working with a bunch of extremely competent, talented, committed colleagues with whom I'm very fortunate to be with on multiple aspects of policy, especially on land governance and on land policies across the country, and also across comparative kind of jurisdictions. I also have a strong research interest in aspects of governance. So for people, I'm assuming people are from law schools, from public policy schools. I would see a suite of kind of common interests in some of what I do. By way of a quick introduction to the UFP, the Urban Fellows Program, it's a very unique program in the country. It's unique because it is, on the one hand, interdisciplinary. In other words, it's not about multiple disciplines coming together and sitting in different boxes. In other words, it's not about, say, economics and sociology and history and public finance inside a room and then staying there. But it's actually about the mixing of containers and the mixing of multiple disciplines and to create new knowledge. It's also about transgression across disciplines. It's about the margins of disciplines. So there's the first facet of the UFP, which is particularly striking and different from other programs in the country, similar programs or fellowship programs, is that it's interdisciplinary. The second, it has a very strong location in the urban and by extension in the peri-urban, in the rural, but more urban and peri-urban. As India is kind of quite seamless in the way it's changing. A lot of times you cannot understand urban without having a grounding of change in which rural landscapes are transitioning into urban with a lot of gray in between. So the second facet of the UFP being that it's located along the urban. So you have interdisciplinary teaching on a common kind of urban area, so to speak, or urban areas and subjects around the urban. The third aspect of the UFP, which is particularly interesting, is the integration of theory and practice, and by which the idea is not to have knowledge strictly from a textbook. Of course, there's a lot of knowledge from textbooks and not to be derided, but knowledge which is contextual, which is rooted, which is ground up, which is connected to what our daily lives look like, but translated from the minutiae of our daily lives to more systemic ways of looking at a problem, and I'll come to that in more specific detail. So, in that, and the fourth, of course, is a very strong commitment to questions of inclusion, of diversity, of access, of inequality, equality, of public goods and services, of some common good, which inform the program as it kind of runs through. And I'll get into the details with questions. The third part of this, shall we say, background introduction is why should law and public policy students be at all keen to do this? I'll take it in two ways. Let me do the governance aspects first. So if you look at a common, like your common life in the city, and look at the kind of array of everyday problems that you face, it could be garbage, where for some reason or the other, you are either as a consumer not getting a solution to your garbage problems, or in a more systemic way, you really care about, say, questions of segregation of waste, about recycling, and so on. So whether it's garbage, whether it's housing, across a spectrum of consumer interests, right from low-income groups to, or even from homelessness, all the way up to, say, real estate regulation and so on. Whether it's infrastructure, whether it's water supply, whether it's electricity, whether it's environment, whether it's ecology. A lot of our common everyday problems are actually, they remain, without enough study, they remain as personal, anecdotal, quote unquote, my story kind of problems. Whereas this program tries to look at these issues, so to speak, from a systemic, from a larger policy lens. And that lens is not just a private, a government lens alone. It also is about the market, it's about community, it's about society. So a whole array of urban issues, or urban problems, everyday issues, everyday problems are kind of taken up and looked at, ground up in a more systemic policy governance orientation. So which is an immediate appeal for policy, anybody who's interested in policy, anybody who likes to read newspapers beyond, say, page 1. The other part about the UFP and why law and public policy students should be interested is that if you are a law student, say, and you care about the law more than what is just there in the textbook. So if you look at the law as a given and that's about it, and you're headed out from where you're studying right now to a law firm, and if you don't really care about how the law was made, how the law is implemented, whether the law makes sense or not. In other words, the law as a kind of living beast. So if you really don't care about all that, and you're more or less streamlined mainstream law student, then perhaps this program is not for you. But if you care about basic questions such as why does, say, the law look the way it does? Who made the law? How was the law interpreted? Is the law itself fair, just, reasonable? Is it transparent? Has the law itself, what is the implementation of this law looking like? Does that tell a story? Is the law well drafted? Is the law sufficient? What does the law do to a larger problem that the law tried to address? Did it succeed? In other words, if you go beyond a strict kind of positivist way of looking at law, more than a law as an end in itself. So typically, like with all disciplines, I guess, by the time you're third year, fourth year, fifth year law school, it becomes a kind of all-encompassing universe in itself. But this program, but if you have any disquiet about that, saying, I did all that, but I'm kind of, I feel something there's more to it. I feel something's more to it. I've seen things are not really 2 + 2 is not adding up. Then yes, then this is a good program for you. In other words, we're looking for people who are not so completely okay with things as the way they are in law and in policy. By that I don't mean critique for critique's sake, but I mean an interest in interrogating things, an interest in critical reflection, an interest in going beyond the needs of the textbook or of the next semester CGPA. So in that sense, I would say that yes, this is an interesting program. The other part about this program, which I find might be of interest to people, is those who are at, say, who are working maybe a year or two, or who have worked for a year or two, and who in their respective disciplines or interests, and who are still willing to search more, not yet found their kind of calling, so to speak, and willing to search more, looking around, want to change streams if need be, and not knowing where to go, how to go about it, and looking for some more grounded knowledge with people from totally different backgrounds and disciplines. So a lawyer with an engineer, a public policy person with a community activist, a private startup person with a rights activist, etc., etc. I think this program would appeal to such people, not so much because of the orientation of the program itself, in terms of what the program. There's no one kind of solution, but in the manner in which the interactions across people will happen, in the manner in which the interactions with a very vibrant faculty would happen, and most importantly, at the end of the day, what do you get out of it at the end of the UFP, of the fellowship, is that we see transformation. We've seen this for the last couple of years. We see some amazing transformations in people from how they began and how they ended, which is not just in terms of the jobs they get and the placements they get and so on, but more in terms of the kind of interest they develop, the kind of sectoral interest they develop, somewhat firmer in how they want to go about doing things as they move out of this. The other rewards are, of course, very obvious, which is that tuition is fully funded, There's a rigorous process of application, of course, and that goes with the kind of program. But once you make it, it seems a very enriching experience for young people and for people who are willing to experiment a little bit more, willing to shape stuff, willing to take risks. Yeah. So I think I've spoken for about 10-15 minutes maybe. So I would like to hear your questions, because that's why I'm here. I want to respond to any and every question that you might have on what I've just spoken or what I've not spoken. If there's any doubt you have that needs addressing from law or a legal or a policy point of view, please feel free to ask. Please type your message, and I'll respond. And there is no such thing as a stupid question. Every question is a good question. Every question comes from somewhere, and I'm here to kind of to address that. So please shoot. Again, the question is how is this different from a LAMP fellowship? It's entirely different. The LAMP fellows at PRS are placed with a member of parliament, and they basically quote unquote shadow member of parliament in what the member of parliament does during sessions of parliament, and they make small briefs, small legislative briefs or minutes, briefs rather, which help a member of parliament be better prepared for parliamentary sessions. So those could be on multiple subjects. So if there's a bill on, say, let's give an example. For example, if there's an IAM autonomy bill currently at, say, in Parliament, a LAMP fellow's job would be to make a small, concise summary of that bill, and once assigned to a particular member of Parliament, would to run through the bill in the way that the MP wants it. This program is not about that at all. In some ways, I would say. This is a teaching kind of program. So it is not about going out there and doing all of that. It's not it's a teaching program. So here there will be a full component of teaching, which is called the commons. Then there are concentrations. So there's something called the commons, which runs through, which is basically everybody up to speed on some common concepts, common ways of looking at perspectives across sectors. And then you move from commons into specialization, so to speak, which we call concentrations. So somebody might be interested in, say, water supply. Then we will go into deeper stuff on water supply. Somebody might be interested in real estate. Somebody might be interested in infrastructure, or somebody and policy. I'm assuming that this crowd today is about law and policy. So somebody might be interested in the regulation of utilities. Somebody might be interested in the regulation of land, and so on and so forth. So what we call electives. So depending on interest of people, we do electives in which people get a better grounding of their respective specific interests. The other thing about this, which is completely different from LAMP, is that we also have a very grounded internship placement component, where people are also placed with existing projects happening at IIHS. They have to, of course, satisfy a few tests. And IIHS runs a number of very interesting research projects. So while this UFP is going on, you could well be assisting a particular IIHS practice-based project or research project, and doing something about it in real world, it's a real situation, not a classroom situation. You're dealing with people outside the classroom, and so on. And it's a real kind of value add to that. And then there is overall, there is over and above that, there is an internship which is outside IHS entirely, and which requires the fellow to go out and be interning at a number of kind of organizations, be they private, public. They could be companies, they could be community workers, they could be NGOs, and so on. And some may decide to pursue more academic research kind of things, write a thesis, write a dissertation, write a very strong paper, wants to go abroad, and wants to kind of pursue that. So there's that option as well. So the quick and short answer to the PRS versus UFP is that PRS, I mean the LAMP versus UFP, is that LAMP is actually a full placement throughout the year without any teaching component. There's no teaching here. In the UFP at IHS is entirely a teaching program, and of course you get a certificate at the end of it. But within that teaching program, it's done in such a way that it's more grounded, it's more rooted in practical experience. It can go out and get interned at various places, etc. So it's a totally different thing altogether. More questions?
Okay, I'm going to read out the next question. It says, does IHS also involve itself with advocacy? Meaning, does it file PILs, and will the fellow be involved with it?
The answer is more complicated than a yes and no. IHS has current research and practice work which has an advocacy component. In terms of, say, I'll give you an example. For example, in the past, we have assisted governments in the framing of, say, affordable housing policy. We are assisting governments in, say, forest policy and so on, land, water supply, sanitation, and so on. Some of the assistance also has a role which is an engagement with communities, and so on. But IHS has not filed PILs, and the UFP fellows would not perhaps be involved in any PIL for that matter. So, but the UFP fellow, if placed with a lawyer or an organization that works on advocacy during the internship of the UFP, could well be working with an external kind of lawyer or organization, advocacy group, and that could be a part of the UFP fellows internship during this UFP, and in which case the lawyer or the organization, as the case may be, might be involved. And we have an extensive network of people within the legal community as well, and outside in the policy circles, who are involved in direct, shall we say, litigatory, binary kind of interventions.
Okay, the next question is, what kind of time commitment is expected? Are there opportunities for field research?
Yeah, of course. I'm just assuming that when you're reading out the question, I don't have to read out the question again. I don't have to say the question again, or should I?
No. If you want, Amlan, there is a questions bar. If you just drop down, you will be able to see all the questions.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. I'm just trying to see if the questions are.
The question will be there. Just use the pop-up button so it will blow up on your screen as well.
I think it's better that I hear it from you. So.
Okay, fine.
What was the last question?
The last question was, what kind of time commitment is expected? Are there opportunities for field research?
Yes. See, it is a full-time teaching program, in its initial phase. So when you come, if you are selected for the UFP, then you would be expected to put in all your hours. It's a full-time residential program into the UFP, and not be kind of moonlighting, so to speak, because it is a tough initiation into the program, the first 2-3 months, because obviously if you're a lawyer and you're suddenly being taught not just the law that you know, but also say aspects of economics, aspects of public policy, aspects of even design, uh, infrastructural services, and somebody else from, say, an engineer is learning stuff about law, or so that whole enmeshing of disciplines is a difficult learning curve and would require full-time kind of attention. So you cannot say, I'll do a job and then I will also do this program on the side. I don't think it will work like that. Having said that, as you move after the first initial few months into, as I said, the internship stage, as well as the being involved in IIHS project stage, depending on your interest, area of interest, you might well be interested, say, for example, in affordable housing questions. You might be interested in environmental questions. You might be interested in, depending on, how it goes, regulatory questions. Depending on your interest and competence and aptitude and so on, you would have an opportunity to be part of some IIHS project, ongoing project. Oh, and of course, in the internship component of this, you would, if you are interested, you would be also kind of, you would have the opportunity for field research. But that is not going to happen on day one. The point is that you will be brought up to speed on the kind of collaborative research, on the kind of collaborative practice that involves interdisciplinary work, involves working in teams, involves knowledge of some domain, involves having at least basic understanding of your individual discipline. Once you're there after a few months, then yes, your the field research component kind of can kick in. Yes.
Okay, should I go on to the next question?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, is weightage given to prior work experience or background in urban development related fields when considering the applications, or would just interest without demonstrable work experience suffice for those who aren't recent graduates?
It's a nice trick question. So would we count experience more than interest? I'm assuming this question is coming from somebody who is yet to graduate. I kind of sense it, empathize. In the application stage, I'm not going to give the plot away, but I'll encapsulate in briefly. Is that in the application stage, we are looking for committed, passionate, interested people who want to think, reflect, critically think of issues. If you are a law student and you have not yet kind of gone into the world, at the same time, I would assume that you would have had at least a few internships over the few years that you've been a law student. And if that reflects in the kind of, in the problem statement, in the kind of questions that you are required to answer in the application stage, it will show your interest, your commitment, your shall we say disquiet in your discipline. You're not feeling great about it, but you do want to do something about it. You're a law policy student, but you think it's not getting you anywhere. You are really, you could have a problem around, which is an everyday problem, but the way you've been taught law, the way you've been taught public policy, is such disconnect between the two, or that there is no disconnect and you're actually being very, but you can't game it basically. My point is you can't game the application. But if you are honest about it, and if you put that through, even if you don't have experience in urban development related kind of specific domains, um, the people judging your application will take that seriously. So we've had students, people without any urban experience, who came from the world of, say, media studies, uh, communication, film, who didn't know the policy jargon at all, journalism. Um, so it's not that we will say, okay, no, no experience or no. On the other hand, it's true that if you have some work experience in some urban area, and for law and public policy students, I would say there is very little that is not within the domain of urban. If you just open your minds a little and look at the basic case law around, just see the newspapers and see what is troubling a city. Go beyond page 1 to page 3 and 5 and look at the section of the newspaper which says nation. If you're involved in, if you look at the lovely podcasts going around these days, you would realize that a lot of the stuff that you might be interested in actually does relate to the urban, but you never thought of it that way. I mean, you could look at, for example, I'll make a very simple point of, if you've been following what's going on the planning stuff, on the ceiling stuff in Delhi, as a lawyer, you will say, oh, there is the Supreme Court with instructions, injunctions, orders in various ways. There is the DDA, which is doing interesting things on the master plan. There's the government of Delhi on one hand, in a very confounded constitutional kind of space. And you will, as a lawyer, you might look at it as a very kind of legal question, which is that, oh my God, this is a Supreme Court thing, but it's it's a little confounded, but we have to follow the order, etc. But you just want to open your imaginative kind of dimensions a little and realize that this is actually a very difficult problem. It involves livelihoods, it involves location, it involves mixed land use, it involves this in the capital of the city of the country, which is again constitutionally very different from everybody else, and it has very urban dimensions to it. So you might be interested in garbage. As a law student, you might be like, every time you hear about a massive landfill going completely haywire, you may not have made the connect between the solid waste management rules, the environment law that you studied in law school or in public policy school, and what is going on around you, even if you may not have worked in the sanitation space or in the solid waste management space. But if you pay attention to the technical aspects, of which law and public policy are only instruments, are a part, my assumption is that you would, I think the world would open up for you. In other words, what is happening around you will be opening up for you in various ways. But it all depends on how you've been taught law, how you've been taught public policy. And these are huge disciplines with multiple sub-schools and schools of their own, schools of thought, I mean. And it depends on how you come at it, frankly. So I would say that if you have worked in the urban, naturally, you might already have a perspective on things. But that doesn't mean that your perspective is the only one that exists, or that because you have that perspective, the application committee will say, oh, wow. But it might just be that you bring an added dimension to your application, which is a good thing. But having said that, we are cognizant of people who have come from various disciplines which have nothing to do with the urban. But we saw something in the application which made us believe that this person could A, think about the urban, B, make a transition into perhaps a career in the urban, and C, brought something to the table which, either in terms of diversity, either in terms of perspective, criticality, or sheer passion, which is a good thing. So you could write well, and that could be a good thing. You could be a good communicator, that could be a good thing. You could be a good uh, filmmaker. You could be a good filmmaker, and you know the aesthetics of film, and then deepening your kind of base in particular sectors around the urban. Or you could be a journalist. But what a good thing about law and public policy is that we folks are trained in the art of kind of being rigorous about what we do. You can't survive law school without having read case law well. Uh, you can't scrape your way through public policy without knowing basic analytical tools. So in that sense, a rigor is good. So you can sense that yeah, public policy and law are good ways to look at the world, but you may not have an urban kind of dimension to the way you're looking at the world. And where I think it's not something which cannot be taught. It's not rocket science, but it's more up to what really interests you there, and I think that will show. Yeah. Next question.
Okay. I think you've answered this question with your previous answer, but I'm going to say it out loud anyway. It says, is it necessary to have had public policy background or some public policy exposure to get selected?
No, no. It's not necessary for you to have a public policy background for you to be selected. And I'll actually widen the thing a little more, because I assume that people who are in this discussion are law and public policy people. But the universe is not just law and public policy. While we look at the world as law and public policy, the universe has elements which are, shall we say, much wider. So I would say, let's say, for example, let's look at energy systems. If we want to make the transition into a kind of more sustainable way of looking at the world and living in it, as law and public policy professionals, we have the whole discourse around the UN, we have a lot of Supreme Court stuff, we know what we're talking about. But we also have a lot of stuff which is around externalities, which is about costing, which is about technology, which is about choosing, say, between solar and wind and renewables, and what place and why. Is solar near the sea better than solar near the not so near the sea? Is where does wind work better or not, or doesn't work so better? What policies should be in place for a particular technology in a particular location? Are all very difficult questions, and I'm not suggesting that you will find the answer to all your questions in a one-year course, but this course will encourage you to think like this. In other words, then you'll be asked, if you want to become a renewables person, say, you'll ask these difficult questions. You look at the National Solar Mission, you look at the National Climate Change Mission, and ask basic questions about whether it was structured right, what the incentives are, whether there are other ways of doing this, what works at the central level, does it work at the federal, at the state level equally well? What are the center-state dimensions here? What are the international comparative examples that can be understood here? And so on. So while I would say public policy is not a necessity, we do come with some baggage of our own, and some of which is good. Next question.
Okay, I'll move on to the next question. It says, in what ways can people from gender studies background benefit from this fellowship?
I think at the very broad principle level, IHS is very committed to diversity as a structural kind of principle. And it shows in our work. If you go to our website, you'll see a lot of that. shows in what we do. And within diversity, gender is a very kind of important component. So, for example, in our proposed human development school, we have a concentration on human development. Gender, it's mainstreaming, or even more structural questions around the way in which certain policies, certain laws, even think about the gender question. These are questions that are important. So, so at the very basic level, people from gender studies would perhaps get, having got a grounding in gender studies, would perhaps get the opportunity of looking at gender dimensions to questions across sectors, across disciplines, and that could bring shed new light on not just your own work experience and how you kind of go about doing things, but also in the way disciplines are structured, how the way policies are made, around the way one's own life experiences kind of get shaped. Yeah, I think it's a good place. It gives you a locational container to look at gender more fundamentally, more critically. At the same time, gives you the grounding beyond just theory. So I think it will be a good thing.
We don't have any more questions, Amlan. We're at the end of the questions.
So should we wait for a couple of minutes or call it a day?
We can wait for a minute or two for any more questions. If not, we can call it a day.
I think unless there's one more question, I would basically close with the remarks that I think just go for it. If you're been interested enough to attend a webinar for an hour, you should apply. You should apply also because there's funding riding on it. You should apply because it might just change your life in a way. It might open up opportunities for you that you did not think of. And I've seen people who came with certain expectations and then who left with completely different expectations about life. So in some ways, it is a transformative kind of experience. At the same time, I think it does give people a very strong practical, but at the same time classroom kind of teaching orientation. You're still in teaching, you're still in student mode. You're not gone out of student mode, but you are in that kind of bridge space between being a student and being a full-time kind of experienced professional. So in that bridge space, when you're trying to sort stuff out for yourself, but you're not properly grounded in a teaching program which allows you to move across, and you want to get this done in a year before you move on to perhaps academics or return to your jobs in some different way, or even start new jobs, but you just don't know where to go. You've done your law stuff. You're not sure you want to do litigation. You don't kind of want to buy the corporate law firm bullet, and you still have some interests which, if you don't do something about them, they just go away. Then I think you should go for it. Just apply. Just apply. Go ahead, apply. See where it takes you. And for public policy students, of course, I think stuff that we're doing has deep public policy ramifications. I think you should go for it. Give it a shot. It's a tough application process. It's not going to be easy. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe you'll make it. Yeah. And that year might be good for you between taking a job which you don't like and doing this, and then taking up a job that you like, or maybe you found your passions kind of thing. Yeah. I think it's one of those
We have a
stories.
question here, Amlan.
Hmm.
It says, what type of certificate do we get at the end of the fellowship? Does the fellowship have traditional exam system?
The certificate is a certificate that you've finished all the requirements of the urban fellowship program. So you won't, in other words, you won't get the certificate if you don't complete academic requirements, academic and whatever requirements. So you can't kind of, once you're in, you can't quote unquote free ride or cheat your way out. So you won't get the certificate if you don't fulfill basic academic requirements. So what are these academic requirements? What kind of exams are there done? It varies from course to course. For example, the stuff that I do, I teach governance, where I bring in aspects of law, politics, economics, sociology. I've tried different ways of examinations. So no rattabaji, no rote learning stuff. They usually, if you attended the class well, then you might get a situation analysis or a problem statement or identify the issue kind of thing. But people have different, other supervisors have different ways of examining or assessment. But the assessments are less, how do I say? If you don't think about the stuff that you do, if you just kind of reading text and, I mean, if you read text and you have a really kind of very academic orientation to the world and you have very theoretical orientation to the world, that's also great. That's good. Because then you can see theory even in kind of very practical everyday issues, which is very good. But you'll be tested there. So the exams are not the typical exam that you kind of find in most places, which is you'll get a question which most people already know the answer of, and which perhaps featured in an exam 2 years ago, and you found that same question repeated again 2 years later. You won't have that. Be more applied, more to do with. I mean, you can't bunk class and say I'm going to crack this exam. I don't think it'll happen. But the exams are not so. It's not so intense that you have to spend like ages preparing for it or something. If you've done class well, if you're a thinking person, you're connected with the disciplines, connected with what's going on, I think you do well in the exams. But yes, there are exams. The certificate is not a degree. It's not a diploma. It is a certificate, and that's about it. So it is a certificate that you have completed the requirements for the leading to the urban fellowship program. That's how it is. It's nothing more, nothing less.
No more questions, Amlan.
Okay. So thank you, folks, for attending this. And I think if you have further questions, feel free to ask. I think there must be some kind of email window there where people are.
Yeah, there is ufp.info@ihs.ac.in.
Can you repeat that slowly?
Yeah, ufp.info@iihs.ac.in. That's the email that you can write us to. If you visit our website, which is urbanfellows.ihs.co.in, you will find 2 numbers which you can call us at between 10 to 6 from Monday to Friday, and we'll answer any queries that come to us.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
All the best.
Thank you.